וידבר משה אל ראשי המטוס לבני ישראל לאמור זה הדבר אשר ציווה אדוני איש כי ידור נדר לאדוני או השבה שבועו לאסור איסור על נפשו לא יאכל דברו כי כל היוצא מפיו יעשה אלה מסעי בני ישראל אשר יצאו מארץ מצרים לצבאוסם ביד משה ואהרון ויכתוב משה את מוצאיהם למסעיהם על פי אדוני ואלה מסעיהם למוצאיהם.
This weekly Torah portion contains of two parashot. One is called Matot, and the other one is called Massei. Matot starts with the book of Numbers, chapter 30, where it says that Moses speaks to the heads of the tribes of Israel. And Massei means journeys, that describes it has the record of the journeys of the sons of Israel during the 40 years of their travel around the Mount Sinai. Number of issues are raised at the end of the book of Numbers. The issue of vows is in Numbers chapter 30. And then the story of the war between the Midianites and Moabites and Israel. That is the first military encounter which Israel had to take in order to make their ways toward the land of Canaan, because the Midianites and the Moabites were on their way and they were resisting. And of course, then again, there is a legislation about how to do and what to do about the spoils of the war. And then we have, then the Israelites are very clear in the border of the land. The last camp which they stay is right across the Jericho on the eastern bank of the river Jordan. And Jericho is the strongest city in the Canaan, and it is the ultimate prize. It's their way to victory. It's their way to the possession of the land. And right in the middle of the triumphant preparation to the entering of the land, Reubenites come to Moses and say, look, we are the big tribe. We are the biggest amongst you. And we see this area, which is called Gilad. Gilad is a little bit north of Jericho, across on the eastern side of the Jordan River. And they say, how about us? We had this fight here with the King Og and other kings here, and we cleared that land. In fact, these two kings with which Israel fought, and this war was described in the book of Numbers chapter 21, were actually the last Rephaims. Rephaims were the oldest settlers in the area of Canaan, who are dated way back into the time of Sodom. Sodomites and Gomorrites were of the Rephaim, and we don't exactly know who these Rephaims are. Possibly they are the ones who actually the descendants of Ham, the descendants of Canaan, because Canaan was a mixture of northwestern Semitic tribes, particularly the Phoenicians and other other small tribes, and today we have some remaining inscriptions, Northwest Semitic inscriptions that we study, and we have some records of these civilizations. We don't know anything about the Rephaims and other names of the nations that lived in Canaan, but the Rephaims they were mentioned way back in the book of Genesis chapter 13. And so this area of Gilad was cleared from them, and it was not occupied. And so Reubenites, the largest tribe, is asking to give them that land. And they say, okay, we know we're the largest one. We have over 150,000 men with a sword. We can't just betray you. But if we get this land, we promise that we'll continue fighting for the Canaan. And their request is satisfied. And then Moses inserts in the Parasha Massei, he inserts the detailed records of all the travels of the people of Israel during the 40 years. And this is a very interesting piece of record, especially to match it with today's geographical names. It presents a challenge. And after the description of all the places where Israel encamped, God tells Moses to start dividing the land. Since the Reubenites already took their portion, of course, the other tribes are also interested in seeing where are they going to settle, what are they going to take. And so the entire chapter 34 delineates the borders. But there is one tribe which is not going to get anything. And that's why chapter 35 describes the destiny and the future of the tribe of Levite, who are now to get, we already studied that they will be recipients of 1/10 of the GDP of the nation, and that's how they're going to live. We studied in the book of Leviticus chapter 10 that they are to teach the nation the law of God and his statutes. They are the ones to take care of the sanctuary, and of course they deserve something. They need some kind of place to live on these cities, and this is how the decision is made. It says in Leviticus chapter 35, verse 2, "Command the sons of Israel that they give to the Levites from the inheritance of their possession the cities to live in, and you shall give to the Levites pasture lands around the cities." In other words, from the portions, from the territory which all tribes are going to take for themselves, they have to settle on their territories, the Levites, and the land has to be sufficient so that the Levite could have some space to have their cattle. Even though they are not allowed, the Levites were not allowed to own the land, they were not allowed to own the fields in order to produce the produce and have a significant economic activity. But as we know, all Israelites since the time of Abraham and Jacob, they had the cattle. And so Levites also had the cattle. This wasn't confiscated from them. And so they needed some space for their sheep and their goats to graze. Of course, again, it wasn't a commercial space, but personal space. That's the idea behind it. And this is how it was built. They give the measure, and then they say, verse 6, the cities which you shall give to Levites shall be 6 cities of refuge, which you shall give for the manslayer to flee to. And in addition to them, you shall give 42 cities. In other words, Levites were supposed to get no land, but 48 cities, which means that 4 cities per tribe. And that made a sense. God wanted to make sure. God didn't want to settle Levites, for example, in Jerusalem. He could have. Actually, Jerusalem wasn't even taken, and it is not quite clear from the distribution of the land here in Exodus, in Numbers 34, that there will be a specific capital, because the capital is not needed, but God could have just placed the tribe of Levi in one large city around the sanctuary, and that is it. But God has a different intent, because he knows now that there's going to be a change in the situation of the people. The sanctuary was located in the midst of the camp for 40 years. But now the territory will be about 100 miles from south to north, and about 40 miles from west to east. And that's a long walking distance. If in the camp situation, every Israelite had an opportunity to be almost every day at the sanctuary, and in fact, they had no economic activity. They just were on the move. Now the situation is different. And this is why the laws of the Mishpatim in Exodus 23, they are clear that there is a requirement for 3 times a year to come into the sanctuary. But that is absolutely not enough. What can person learn about his or her God, about the Torah, during this 3 days a year? It's absolutely impossible. And this is why God makes sure that Levites are scattered all over the country in such a way that they are able, that their cities are accessible, and then they can come to the people, and they mingle with the people, and they provide continuous instructions to the people. But the 6 cities, they had a very, very important status. Here is what these refuge cities are. Speak to the sons of Israel, verse 10, and say to them, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall select yourselves as cities to be your cities of refuge, that the manslayer who has killed any person unintentionally may flee. The 2 cities shall be to you as a refuge from avenger, so that the manslayer will not die until he stands before the congregation for trial. These are very, very important texts to illustrate that Israel had a very strong judicial system, a system which actually presumed somebody innocence before it's proven otherwise. And we saw that presumption of innocence before in Numbers 5, when it talked about the Sota case, the woman whom husband suspects to be adulterous. She is given the water to drink before any conclusion is made. She is presumed innocent. And here is the same. This is another evidence for the judicial system, which talks about the presumption of innocence. And these cities are for that purpose, that the one who has committed a manslaughter can actually flee to before and stand the trial from. Who is avenger here? This is another concept. The concept of execution of death penalty. We see throughout the books of the Torah that there are a number of crimes that are punishable by death. And we will study how this death verdict was executed in the later parashot. But particularly here, we see that the ones who execute the murders are the avengers. Who are the avengers? They are the relatives of the victim. In other words, what it says here, Israel doesn't have a police, has a judges, but it doesn't have a police force, and it doesn't have prisons. We studied that the imprisonment comes through slavery. When a person committed the offense that is punishable by the prison terms, he is going and selling himself to slavery for 6 years. Now we have a case when a person commits and kills somebody. And there are two options here. A manslaughter, which is unintentional, and a murder. We have in the book of Exodus, in the Parashat Mishpatim, a provision. The provision says that if anyone kills somebody unintentionally, God said, I will provide a city for him to flee to. And this is the answer to that provision. Now it is enacted. When somebody commits a murder, on the other hand, the Mishpatim says, you take this one even from the altar. That is also an interesting concept, because the altar in the sanctuary was a place of refuge for a repentant sinner. Anyone who admitted and repented in what he has done could not be sued unless he is a murderer. The murderer has to be taken away from the altar and executed. But who executes the murderer? The avenger. Again, there is absolutely no police force. There is absolutely no people who would be in the shooting squad. I read the article about 5 years ago about the man who participated in Russian prisons in the execution of the criminals. And the reporter asked him, what did you do? And his job was to come to a special hall when the prisoner was set on a special chair and tied up, and his eyes were also covered. He was blindfolded, and he was supposed to come with a gun and stick this gun barrel through the hole and look into the other hole and just shoot this criminal. And the man was admitting that this was an extremely difficult job, because he was really, before he could do it, he had to really study the history of that criminal, and to make himself really angry at what this criminal did. And it was terrible. It was really terrible. And so Israel never had any type of execution squads. Neither they have any doctors who could administer the lethal injection. But if the individual had intentionally murdered someone, the relatives had a full right to come after him and kill him. That was a permission which was given by God. Of course, under this system, the avenger could choose to forgive. That is true. But it was on the mercy of the avenger. But in this case, when somebody has done something unintentionally, if it was an accident, the trial was set. And in fact, even if it was a murder, the avenger could not enact his revenge before the trial verdict. So if the trial convicts the individual in the murder, then he could not stay in the city of refuge. But if he is unintentional, then it says in verse 25, the congregation shall deliver the manslayer from the hand of the blood avenger, and the congregation shall restore him to his city of refuge which he fled. This city of refuge was the Levitical city. And this is beautiful, to see how the Levites were actually functioning as the spiritual backbone of the nation of Israel. That was the place, instead of sitting in some kind of prison where it's already known, every country knows that people who go through prison system will only become worse. The man who was accused in involuntary manslaughter was inside the city where the Levites, the servants of God, resided. Of course, he couldn't leave the borders of the city, because if he did, the relatives had a full liberty to kill him. But he had a special limitation, which was enacted there. It says here in verse 28, because he should have remained in the city of refuge until the death of the high priest. But after the death of the high priest, the manslayer shall return to the land of his possession. This is a beautiful symbolism. On the one hand, this symbolism shows the limitation of symbolic sanctuary system that took care of the sin. In other words, this type of sin could not be taken care in the sanctuary by its service, through the priests eating and consuming the meat of the sin offering. That was too much. The only substitution for the death of the human being, if it was unintentional murder, was the death of the high priest. Beyond that, if the murder is intentional, then it was supposed to be the blood of an individual that would pay for the sins which he committed. And the Talmud in the tractate Sanhedrin discusses the issue, whether there is a chance for the individual to actually inherit the world to come. And they say, well, there is, because according to the tradition, before the execution, the individual is given a chance to repent. And they say, if he repents, he pays with his own blood for his sins, because the sanctuary cannot take care of it. Even the high priest with his death cannot take care of it. Only his blood can cover the sin. And that's again an important concept which we can see was understood by the rabbis. The concept that the sin has to be somehow be paid for. Somebody has to take the responsibility for the sin. And that's in the basis of the substitutionary sacrificial system that has its limitations. Nevertheless, the city of refuge was the last possible option to take care for this type of crime, and there was no other options. The haftarah for this Torah portion is found in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 1 and chapter 2. Where Jeremiah is talking about the destiny of Israel and the problems that Israel had. And Jeremiah talks specifically about some issues with the manslaughter here in Israel throughout his book. And it's interesting how God says Jeremiah, saying, behold, I have made you today as a fortified city, as a pillar of iron, and as the walls of bronze against the whole land. It is interesting, this image of Jeremiah holding up to the standards that the Levites were supposed to hold up. Because Levites and the cities of refuge and the Levitical cities, they were supposed to be the fail-safe system that would prevent Israel from sliding into corruption. And the system, according to Jeremiah, did not work. What the chapter from the New Testament which we suggest you to read as a complement to Haftarah in the Torah portion talks about the better system of taking care of the sins. It talks about the perfect high priest who is not only the high priest, but is also sacrifice, which is the ultimate fulfillment of all different small types that were placed throughout the sanctuary. The types that all pointed out to Jesus the Messiah. And the text here, but when the Messiah appeared as a high priest for the good things to come, he entered through the greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with his hand, that is to say, not of his creation, and not through the blood of goats and calves, but through his own blood. He entered the holy place once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. This shows that there were certain imperfections in the types used in the sanctuary, but through the Messiah, this all came to perfection and ultimate fulfillment.